The air over Orvan 3 was black with smoke and plasma fire, the sky split open by the relentless pounding of alien artillery. Buildings burned in jagged lines of light, casting the refugee city in a flickering orange glow that felt more like the maw of hell than a sanctuary. Lyra's boots pounded against a cracked ferrocrete as she pulled her younger sister through a collapsing corridor, every detonation making the walls shudder and rain dust. Somewhere beyond the next block, a tower gave way with a metallic scream, folding in on itself like wet paper. The heat rolled in waves, carrying with it the stench of scorched metal and burnt flesh. "Keep moving!" Lyra's voice was sharp, but her grip was desperate. She could feel her sister's fingers slipping in her palm, clammy with fear. Overhead, the shriek of biomechanical wings cut through the chaos. Then they were there, bursting through the shattered windows in a flurry of metal claws and sinew. The biomechs swarmed, descending like vultures. One of them landed directly in their path. Its frame was skeletal, skin fused with armor plates, eyes burning with cold mechanical focus. Lyra swung her sister behind her, teeth clenched. She reached for the short blade on her thigh, barely a weapon against. These things... But it was all she had. The drone moved faster than she could react. A sickening, wet sound split the air, and Lyra froze. The creature's forelimb, a blade grown from living bone, was buried deep in her sister's chest. Blood sprayed across Lyra's face, hot and metallic in her mouth. "No, no, stay with me!" She dropped her knife, catching her sister as the drone yanked its blade free. The girl's eyes were already glazing over, her breath catching in a shallow, rattling gasp. Behind them, the city's automated warning system blared through damaged speakers. "All shelters will seal in 90 seconds!" The words pounded against her skull. 90 seconds until the safe doors locked. 90 seconds to get to safety, except safety had died in her arms. The swarm closed in. Dozens of biomech forms emerged from the smoke, their limbs clicking in unison, their movements like a predator savoring the kill. Lyra's chest constricted. She should run. She should fight. Instead, she clung to the dying weight in her arms until a plasma bolt slammed into the ground beside her, hurling both of them sideways. The floor beneath her feet cracked and gave way. Lyra barely had time to gasp before she was falling down through layers of debris and darkness. Her sister's lifeless body wrenched from her grasp as they tumbled into the abyss. She hit hard, the impact blasting the air from her lungs. For a long moment she just lay there, blinking up at the ragged wound of light far above, the distant sounds of war muffled now by stone. The air here was cold, damp, carrying a strange metallic tang. She pushed herself upright, her palms scraping against something smooth and unyielding. Light flickered around her, not from fire, but from something older, something alien. Columns of greenish-blue luminescence pulsed along the walls like veins in some titanic creature. The cavern stretched out in every direction, vast and cathedral-like, its architecture precise yet organic. She staggered forward, stepping over scattered shapes that, at first glance, looked like statues. Then she realized they weren't carved, they were corpses. Armored warriors, their bodies shattered, limbs twisted at impossible angles. Their armor was cracked like porcelain, revealing brittle, mummified flesh beneath. The sight sent a shiver through her spine. And then she saw it. In the center of the cavern, sitting atop a dais of black stone, was a forge. Not the crude, smoke-choked kind her father had worked in, but something that hummed with a low, resonant energy. Suspended above it was a blade, black as a starless void, its surface swallowing the light around it. Faint red lines ran along its length, glowing in rhythm with something that felt uncomfortably like a heartbeat. A voice crackled to life in her ear, the artificial translator embedded in the comm tag at her collar, its tone cold and precise. "Warning, this site contains prohibited technology. Vacate immediately." Lyra's gaze stayed locked on the sword. Her breathing was ragged, her heart a dull, heavy weight in her chest. The forge seemed to call to her, not with words, but with the same instinct that made prey step toward the predator's jaws. Her throat tightened. "There's nowhere left to go," she said, her voice raw, breaking halfway through. Her hand trembled, but she stepped forward anyway. The AI responded with a clipped urgency. "You are not authorized to. I don't care. I don't care." Her boots clicked against the smooth stone floor, each step echoing in the hollow space. She passed more of the dead warriors, their weapons still clutched in skeletal fingers. Some looked like they had been frozen mid-battle, others as if they'd simply collapsed in surrender. She didn't want to imagine what could have killed them all here. She stopped at the edge of the dais, the glow from the blade painting her skin in a ghostly red. The hum grew louder, resonating in her bones. Somewhere above, the war still raged. Somewhere above, The last 90 seconds had probably already passed. She'd missed her chance at the shelters. The AI tried again, its tone sharpening. Touching the artifact may result in irreversible. I've already lost everything, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to it or to herself. Her fingers reached for the hilt. The instant her skin brushed the alien metal, a rush of heat surged up her arm, slamming into her chest like a tidal wave. She gasped, stumbling, but the sword held her hand fast. Behind her eyes, images flashed. 1,000 battles, 1,000 deaths, each one feeding into the blade's dark core. The screams weren't just in her head. They were inside her, seeping into her veins. She wanted to drop it, but her grip wouldn't obey. Somewhere deep in her mind, the same cold, mechanical precision she'd seen in the biomech swarm whispered to her. Words she didn't understand, but somehow knew. Power, purpose, hunger, and above all, the promise. We can make them pay. Lyra's breath came in short, shallow bursts. Her sister's lifeless face swam before her vision, the red glow wrapping it in a halo of vengeance. Her other hand closed around the blade's hilt, and the forge's hum shifted, no longer a background thrum, but a heartbeat syncing with her own. Far above, something exploded. The shockwave shuddered through the cavern, dust drifting down from the unseen ceiling. The war was still going. The swarm was still killing. And Lyra was still alive. For the first time since the sky turned black, she smiled, a sharp, humorless thing. "All right," she muttered. "Let's see what you can do." The forge flared, and the darkness welcomed her in. Lyra stood in the stillness of the cavern, her breaths uneven, her body aching from the fall. The silence here was deceptive, thick, oppressive, as if it was watching her. Above, the war raged on, but down here the air felt suspended, caught between centuries. Her eyes roamed the alien forge, the cold light from the columns casting long, shifting shadows across the floor. Every instinct told her to turn back, but she had nowhere to go and nowhere to return to. Memories pressed in unbidden, her father's hands, broad, calloused, steady shaping molten metal into blades that gleamed under the forge's firelight. He'd always said a weapon was only as honorable as the hand that wielded it. That creed had cost him his life. The day the alien warlords demanded his skill to arm their soldiers, he refused. Lyra remembered the look in his eyes when they took him, proud, unflinching, and the sound of the plasma discharge that ended him. She'd been 15, hiding behind a crate, her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. After that, she learned quickly. Survival meant staying invisible, staying useful, and never standing in anyone's way. The years since had stripped her down to the essentials. She learned the smuggler's routes between shattered colonies, how to barter scrap for food, how to read the slightest shift in someone's stance before a fight broke out. And somewhere along the way, she had discovered the thing that made her different. The sense. Not sight, not sound, but a constant hum in her bones when another living thing was near, a subtle vibration that changed with intent. She could tell if someone was creeping toward her in the dark, feel the way their life force pulsed when they meant her harm. It had kept her alive through more close calls than she could count. Now, that same hum prickled faintly in the edges of her mind, but there was no enemy in sight, no beating heart close enough to read. The vibration came from somewhere else, deeper, older. Her gaze found the source. The blade floated above the alien anvil as though gravity had forgotten it. Its black surface seemed to drink in the faint light, the edges shimmering like oil on water. Veins of crimson light ran through it in branching patterns, pulsing slow and deliberate, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The air around it was charged, heavy with the smell of hot metal and ozone, as if lightning had struck and never left. She took a step closer, boots scraping over the smooth stone. The closer she came, the stronger the pull. It wasn't just her eyes, it was in her chest, in her hands, a need as tangible as thirst. The hum inside her shifted, aligning with the blade's rhythm until it felt like her own pulse. "Analyzing!" The voice of the AI in her comtag broke the silence. A moment later, its tone sharpened. "Artifact identified. S-class biomech, parasitic weapon. Prohibited by all major accords. Handling will result in irreversible biological integration. Advisory. Leave immediately." Lyra's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Irreversible integration," she murmured. "Sounds like everything else in my life." "This weapon will alter your physiology and cognitive patterns." The AI pressed, its voice flat but edged with urgency. "Historical data indicates full corruption of host identity within weeks of contact. It will make you into the very thing you claim to fight." She looked at the blade, at the way its red veins seemed to brighten as if it could hear the conversation. The AI didn't understand. There was nothing left of her that could be corrupted. Her sister was gone. Her father was gone. The people who might have cared if she changed were ash in the wind. "I've already lost everything," she said, stepping up onto the dais. Her voice was low, rough, the words barely more than breath. "What's left to hate?" The moment her fingers brushed the hilt, the world shifted. Heat surged through her arm, flooding into her chest in a wave so intense she gasped. She staggered, her knees hitting the stone, but she couldn't let go. The forge's hum roared in her ears, and then the visions came. She saw battlefields under alien skies, mountains of corpses, rivers of black blood steaming under twin suns. She heard the screams of dying soldiers, human and alien alike, as their life force was drawn from them in threads of red light. The blade was a siphon, and she was the conduit. Each death poured into her until her veins felt molten, until she could barely tell where she ended and the weapon began. Somewhere in the maelstrom of images she felt it. Intention. A consciousness, ancient and patient, curling around her thoughts like smoke. It spoke without words, a whisper pressed directly into her mind. "We can make them pay." Her breaths came fast, sharp, her fingers locked around the hilt. She could feel her own life force thrumming, braided now with the weapons, the two indistinguishable. A shiver ran down her spine, not entirely from fear. There was strength here, raw and unfiltered, the kind that could tear through the swarm above like paper. The AI's voice cut through, faint against the pounding in her head. "Release it, now, before it finishes the bond." She lifted her head, the red light from the blade casting shadows across her face. "No," she whispered, her eyes narrowed, hardening with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. "I'm keeping it." The hum deepened, resonating through the chamber, and the crimson veins flared bright. Whatever she had just agreed to, there was no turning back. And Lyra, for the first time since the sky fell on Orvan 3, didn't care. The instant Lyra's grip closed around the hilt, the blade seemed to come alive. It wasn't just metal, it was muscle, sinew, and pulse, fusing to her skin as if it had been waiting for her all along. Black filaments like liquid steel snaked up her forearm, burrowing into her flesh. Pain flared bright and clean, slicing through her nerves until every muscle locked. Then came the heat, a rush of molten energy flooding her veins, expanding until it pressed against her skin from the inside. She could feel each cell vibrating, burning, then knitting back together stronger than before. Her knees buckled, but the blade held her upright, a conduit forcing its power into her. Behind the heat there was something else. A voice. A voice. It was not sound in the air, but a resonance in her skull, cold and steady, brushing against her thoughts like a predator testing the bars of its cage. "Follow me, and you will never kneel again. Follow me, and the swarm will fall." The cadence was hypnotic, neither male nor female, each word threading into her pulse until she couldn't tell if the voice was hers or the weapon's. She forced herself to breathe, to find the edges of herself before they dissolved into that alien rhythm. When she opened her eyes, the forge's light had dimmed, but the blade pulsed brighter, its veins now matching the quick beat of her heart. She didn't remember deciding to move, but her legs carried her toward the passage leading upward. The war was still above her, and she was no longer willing to hide from it. The tunnel spat her out into the ruins of Orvan 3, a hellscape of twisted steel and fire. The air was thick with the metallic tang of burning alloys and the ozone crackle of plasma strikes. She crouched low behind the charred husk of a transport, scanning the street. The hum of her life sense had changed. It was sharper now, almost visual, mapping the movements of the biomech patrol ahead without needing her eyes. They came into view, 5 of them, moving with perfect mechanical coordination. Their frames were half organic, half machine, bristling with bladed limbs and weapon grafts. One turned its head, sensing her. She didn't hesitate. Lyra moved, faster than she'd ever moved before. The blade sang in her hands, a low, predatory vibration that matched the pounding in her ears. She swung once, the arc cleaving through the first biomech's torso like it was paper. The moment the blade struck, threads of red light lanced from the wound into the weapon, racing up her arms, flooding her body. The creature collapsed, its life force gone in an instant. The others lunged at her, but she was already inside their formation. She spun low, driving the blade through one's abdomen and wrenching it free in a shower of sparks. Energy surged through her again, sealing a shallow cut on her shoulder before she even registered the pain. The third charged from behind. She didn't turn. She simply let the weapon guide her arm back in a blind thrust that found its mark. Another burst of stolen vitality rushed into her. By the time the last biomech hit the ground, she was breathing hard, but not from exertion. She felt full. Her limbs thrummed with raw power, the heat in her chest intoxicating. The small aches she'd carried for years were gone. She could feel every heartbeat in her body as if it was a drum summoning her forward, and that terrified her. She stumbled back, leaning against the wreckage. The corpses around her were husks now, their organic parts gray and brittle, their mechanical components twitching in death spasms. She looked at her hands gripping the hilt, knuckles pale. Hey! That rush, the instant high of strength and certainty, it was too easy to want more. She'd told herself she would use the blade to survive, but part of her already craved another fight, just to feel it again. Footsteps crunched over rubble behind her. She turned sharply, the weapon instinctively angling toward the sound. A man in combat armor stood a few paces away, visor up, rifle lowered, but not entirely relaxed. The insignia on his chest marked him as a field commander of the local resistance. He stared at her, then at the carcasses around them, his expression a mix of awe and wariness. "What the hell?" His voice was hoarse. "What are you?" Lyra met his eyes, the weapon still warm in her grip. "I don't know yet," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "But I'll use it to kill them." His gaze flicked to the blade, to the black filaments still pulsing faintly where they met her skin. Something in his eyes shifted, not relief, not quite fear, but the uneasy calculation of a soldier seeing both a weapon and a liability. "If you can keep that thing pointed at the enemy," he said slowly, "you might just save what's left of this city. If not—" He didn't finish the sentence. Lyra's grip tightened on the hilt, not out of defiance, but because she wasn't sure she could let go. "Ah!" The voice in her head purred faintly, its tone almost amused. "There will always be more to kill." She forced herself to turn away from the commander, scanning the burning skyline. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the swarm was regrouping. She could feel them, the faint tremor of their life signs brushing against her senses like distant thunder. Her fear was still there, but it no longer sat alone. Something darker and sharper stood beside it. Hunger. Lyra exhaled, the sound nearly lost in the distant roar of artillery. "Then let's get to work," she murmured, unsure if she was speaking to the commander, the blade, or herself. Either way, none of them disagreed. The city had been reduced to a maze of burning husks and broken streets. The last surviving pockets of human resistance were barricaded in the inner districts, but their food and ammunition were nearly gone. The swarm outside the walls was restless, pressing closer with each passing minute. Reports from scouts said they would break through in less than 2 hours. That wasn't enough time to evacuate. It wasn't enough time to hold the line. The commanders were arguing over comms, whether to fight to the last or destroy the city themselves before the biomech took it. Lyra listened in silence from the corner of the command post. "Oh!" She could feel the swarm's presence as clearly as she felt her own heartbeat, an ocean of pulsing life force waiting to flood the streets. The blade in her hand thrummed faintly, as though savoring the tension. She had been quiet until now, but as the arguments grew louder, she stepped forward. She stepped forward. "You can't win this by waiting. You have to cut the head off the beast." The room went silent. The commander from earlier narrowed his eyes. "You have an idea?" Lyra glanced at the tactical display red dots marking the biomech positions, the largest cluster at the outskirts where their central control nexus had been identified. "That nexus runs the swarm's coordination. Destroy it and they'll scatter into chaos. They'll still be dangerous, but without direction, we can crush them in smaller waves." "That nexus is a fortress," another officer snapped. "You'd need an army to breach it." Lyra's fingers tightened around the hilt of her weapon. "No, you need one person they can't stop." The commander studied her for a long moment. His voice was low. "You think you can get in?" "I know I can," she said, and the certainty in her tone wasn't entirely her own. It was the blade's voice seeping into her. When she left the command post, the streets were quieter than they should have been. Too quiet. The swarm was drawing back from the outer edges, tightening in a ring around the nexus. She moved fast, sticking to the shadows, her life sense mapping the patrols ahead before she saw them. But with every step closer, the weapon's whispers grew louder. "They're waiting for you. They remember your touch. Go, give them something worth fearing." Images bled into her vision, her father's lifeless body in the dust, her sister's last breath, and then strangers she'd never met, dying in battle, their final moments feeding the blade's hunger. She knew these weren't memories. She should have. They were fragments from the weapon, designed to stoke her rage, to sharpen her until there was nothing left but the need to kill. "Shut up!" she hissed under her breath, but the voice only purred. "Why shut out the truth? You were made for this. You are this." She pressed on, jaw tight, until the street opened into a broad avenue. That was when she felt it, a presence unlike the rest of the swarm. Heavy, immense. It stepped into view with the slow confidence of something that had never lost a fight. The war beast was over 6 meters tall, a monstrosity of armored plates fused to pale, corded muscle. Its claws were as long as her forearm, tipped with steel. Tubes of glowing fluid ran along its body, feeding into a cluster of spines at its back. Its eyes locked onto her, and in the space between two heartbeats, it charged. Lyra barely sidestepped the first swipe. The impact of its claws on the ground sent shards of ferroquite flying. She rolled to her feet, blade raised, feeling its hunger surge to meet the challenge. Energy coiled inside her, begging to be released. The beast roared, a sound that was part engine, part animal. It lunged again, faster this time, forcing her into a backstep that rattled her bones. The air between them seemed to warp with the force of its movements. Struck low, slicing across one of its legs. The blade bit deep, and the red threads of life force leapt into her weapon, surging into her veins. The heat filled her instantly, making her limbs lighter, her vision sharper. But the beast didn't falter. It swung back with enough force to clip her side and send her skidding across the rubble. "Take it all," the weapon urged. "Drink until it's nothing." She charged, slamming the blade into its side. The connection was like a lightning strike, energy flooding her. The beast's roar turning into a raw, tearing scream. It wasn't just sound. She could feel the scream in her head, a psychic howl that scraped against the edges of her mind. For a moment she was drowning in it, her own voice lost beneath the tide of its pain. The temptation to keep going, to drain every drop, was overwhelming. The more she took, the stronger she felt. Her cuts closed. The ache in her ribs vanished. She could see every movement of the beast before it made it. The fight became a dance she led, each strike perfect, inevitable. But with every surge of stolen life, the beast's scream sank deeper into her, settling in a place she feared she'd never be able to silence. When it finally collapsed, a hollow shell, the world snapped back into focus. She was standing over it, chest heaving, the blade still embedded in its body. Her hands shook, not from exhaustion, but from the sick, electric thrill that still buzzed under her skin. She yanked the blade free and staggered back, trying to steady her breathing. The voice in her mind was calm now, almost gentle. See? Power enough to save them all, power enough to never lose again. Her stomach twisted. "If I become a monster," she whispered to herself, "who's left to save them from me?" The reply was immediate, smooth. "A monster is the only thing that can kill a monster." She didn't answer. The street ahead was clear, the nexus looming in the distance like a dark heart beating in time with her own. Every step toward it felt heavier, the echoes of the beast's death still ringing in her skull. By the time she reached the outer perimeter, the swarm's movements were erratic. She had disrupted their chain of command by killing the war beast, but they were still coordinated enough to be dangerous. She slipped between patrols, the blade guiding her toward the massive gates of the control complex. She paused in the shadows, staring at the structure. It rose high above the ruins, all angles and alien metal, its surface rippling faintly as if it were alive. Through the life sense, she could feel the nexus pulsing, a colossal concentration of energy unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was the mind behind the swarm, the thing directing every kill, every movement. Destroying it would cripple them, at least for a time. The whispers in her head grew eager. "Inside!" "End it!" "Feed!" Her fingers tightened on the hilt. The memory of the beast's scream was still there, gnawing at her. She knew she would hear it when she closed her eyes. "Ah!" And yet the thought of that power flooding into her again was not entirely unwelcome. That was what scared her most. She drew a slow breath, forcing her heartbeat into rhythm with the blade's steady pulse. One way or another she would reach the nexus. The question was whether Lyra would walk out or something else entirely. The control nexus loomed ahead like the beating heart of some titanic predator. Its surface was slick and pulsating, every slow ripple sending shivers across the alien metal that formed its walls. The air smelled of copper and ozone, thick with the heat of living machinery. Through her life sense, Lyra could feel its magnitude, millions of connections radiating outward, each one tethered to a biomech soldier somewhere in the city or beyond. It was not a building, it was a mind, and it knew she was here. The gates peeled open as she approached, not with the grind of metal, but with the wet sound of something organic parting. She stepped inside, boots splashing in a thin film of viscous fluid that coated the floor. The walls pulsed in slow waves, glowing faintly as if in time, with a colossal heartbeat. "Welcome," the blade whispered, its tone reverent now. "This is the throne. Take it." She didn't answer. Her focus was on the center of the chamber, where the nexus's core rose like a massive suspended brain, its lobes encased in translucent armor that revealed the roiling neural currents within. tendrils as thick as her torso extended into the walls, feeding instructions into the swarm. Every pulse of light down those tendrils meant a kill, an order, a movement in the war outside. Her radio crackled in her ear. "Lyra, do you see it?" The commander's voice came, strained but steady. "I see it," she replied. Her voice sounded far away to her own ears. "You have 5 minutes. If you can't shut it down, we'll detonate the city. We can't let it take Orphan 3. Lyra's gaze fixed on the core. "Understood." The Blade's voice coiled around her thoughts like smoke. 5 minutes, or forever. Why waste time on destruction when you can rule? "Not interested in ruling," she muttered under her breath. "You misunderstand," it purred. "Not a crown. Command. The swarm will obey you, fight for you. No more running, no more losing. You could end this war in hours." "And the cost?" she asked, though she already knew. "You will be me, and I will be you. We will not be human, but we will be everything else." Her pulse quickened. She imagined the swarm turning on itself, biomech claws tearing apart their own ranks under her control. She imagined the siege breaking, the humans outside cheering as the enemy crumbled. It would work. It could work. But she also saw herself through the commander's eyes, inhuman, her veins glowing red. Her voice no longer hers. She saw the way people would back away, whispering her name like a curse. The radio crackled again, more urgent this time. "Lyra, status! They're breaking through the last barricade." 3 minutes. The Blade's hum deepened. 3 minutes to save them or to watch them die. Which is mercy? She took a step closer to the core. The heat from it washed over her skin, mingling with the heat inside her veins. Her fingers tightened on the hilt. She could feel the connection forming already, the way the Nexus's energy recognized her, beckoned her closer. It wanted her as much as the Blade did. Her sister's face flashed in her mind. Those last seconds before the drone's blade took her life, the shock in her eyes, the blood on her lips, Lyra's throat constricted. "If I do this, I won't come back." "You will be more than you ever were," the weapon promised. The commander's voice broke in, sharp now. "Lyra, answer me. We have to make the call." She stared up at the brain-like mass, the tendrils twitching as if in anticipation. "If I become a monster," she whispered, "who's left to save them from me?" "Monsters kill monsters," the Blade replied, its tone like steel wrapped in velvet. Her legs carried her forward without conscious thought. She plunged the blade into the core's translucent casing. It slid in like flesh yielding to a scalpel, and the chamber screamed. Not sound, pure psychic anguish, lancing through her skull and down her spine. The Nexus's energy poured into her in a torrent so strong her knees buckled. She gasped, gripping the hilt with both hands as the blade fused deeper into her arm, the distinction between them vanishing. The swarm outside faltered. She felt it, the sudden hitch in their movements, the confusion rippling through their shared consciousness. Then the connection snapped into place. Her awareness exploded outward, flooding her with 1,000,000 viewpoints at once. The sight of soldiers in the streets, the heat of engines, the scent of human blood. All of them were hers to command. "Say the word," the Blade urged, almost breathless. "Kill each other," she said, and they obeyed. Across Orphan 3, biomechs turned on their own, claws and blades tearing through their comrades. The sound of battle shifted from the relentless advance of the swarm to the chaos of self-destruction. She could feel their deaths, every one of them, as a pulse of power flooding into her. It was intoxicating and revolting all at once. The commander's voice came through, ragged with disbelief. "Lyra, it's working. They're tearing themselves apart." Her grip on the hilt tightened. The energy was still pouring in, reshaping her from the inside. She could feel her skin shifting, her bones hardening, the last traces of her humanity peeling away like ash in the wind. The core's voice, if it had one, was fading, its control circuits unraveling under her will. But the Blade's presence was stronger than ever, wrapping her in its certainty. "This is what you were meant for. Never again will you kneel." Her reflection in the slick metal of the chamber wall caught her eye. Her irises glowed crimson, the light pulsing in rhythm with the Blade's veins. She didn't look human. Not any more. The radio crackled again. "Lyra, report." She swallowed hard. "It's done," she said. Her voice was steady, but it no longer sounded like hers. Outside, the swarm was dying by its own hand. The city was saved. But the connection between her and the surviving biomech units didn't break. They waited in the dark edges of her mind, silent, obedient. The commander's voice softened. "You're a damn hero." She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. Hero. That wasn't what she felt like. She turned away from the core, the blade still fused to her arm, the hum of 1,000,000 alien minds waiting for her next command. Under her breath, so quiet the radio couldn't catch it, she murmured, "I'm sorry, little sister." Then she walked out of the chamber, the city's fate rewritten and her own sealed forever. The chamber still throbbed with the fading pulses of the biomech nexus, its immense mind unraveling under Lyra's control. The power's still there, coiled and waiting, an endless ocean she could dive into and never surface from. The blade pressed against her thoughts with a steady insistence. Take it all, claim every thread, bind the swarm to her forever. But she pulled back, teeth clenched, forcing herself to stop just short of the point of no return. She wouldn't give it everything. She wouldn't give it all of herself. Instead, she shaped the link, narrowing it until it was a single, sharp channel. Through that sliver, she sent the order, her voice carrying like a commandment into millions of alien minds. Self-destruct. The reaction was instant. Across the city, biomechs froze mid-strike, their claws lowering as if confused. Then, in perfect unison, their cores flared with a blinding light. One by one, they collapsed inward, bodies folding in on themselves until nothing remained but smoking heaps of twisted metal and burnt flesh. The explosions were controlled, precise. No collateral damage, no civilian deaths. Only silence, where moments before there had been unending slaughter. Lyra staggered back from the nexus, her lungs dragging in air like she'd been drowning. The partial merge still burned through her veins, but it hadn't consumed her memories. She could still see her father's forge, still hear her sister's laugh, still remember who she was. That was the victory she hadn't been sure she could win, but there was a cost. As she stumbled toward the open air, she saw her hands glowing faintly under the dim light, red veins tracing patterns along her skin. The glow pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and deep inside, her blood carried a new resonance, alien, potent, wrong. She didn't need the blade to tell her what it meant. Every machine she passed in the corridor shuddered or flickered, its senses registering her as an enemy. Even without the sword drawn, she was now a beacon of threat in every system's eye. She emerged into daylight, if the smoke-choked sky could be called that, and the first thing she noticed was the way. People stopped what they were doing to stare. Soldiers, medics, survivors. They all turned to watch her walk past, their faces split between awe and unease. No one stepped closer. The commander pushed through the crowd, his armor dented and scorched, visor up. Relief lit his features for a heartbeat, then faltered as he got a good look at her. The red light in her veins reflected in his eyes, and she could see the calculation behind them, a savior, but also something to fear. "You did it," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "The swarm's gone. You saved the city." Lyra kept walking. The blade still fused to her arm, but dormant now, its hum quiet. "For now," she replied. He moved to follow her. "You can come back to command." "We could use you." She stopped and turned to face him fully. "You need me," she said, her tone flat, "or you need the monster I've become." His mouth opened, but no words came. The pause was enough of an answer. Lyra's gaze softened just slightly. "You've got a city to rebuild. I can't be here for that. People need someone to follow without wondering if she's going to drain them dry in their sleep." She turned away before he could argue, stepping past the wreckage of the outer wall. Eee! The streets were littered with the carcasses of biomechs, their remains still smoking from the self-destruction. Survivors moved among them, tending to the wounded, pulling the living from rubble. But as she passed, the whispers started, hushed at first, then growing as the distance between her and the city widened. They called her Soul Eater, the red-vined one, the woman who drank the swarms. The names were heavy with both gratitude and dread, and she knew they would outlast her. That was fine. Legends didn't need to come home. By the time she reached the edge of the ruins, the sounds of the city had faded. She stood for a moment, looking back. The wall still stood. The fires were dying. People were alive because of what she had done. That would have to be enough. The blade stirred faintly in her mind, a quiet ripple of amusement. "They'll call you when the next enemy comes." "They'll call," she agreed, but I might not answer. "You will," it said, certain. "Because this is who you are now." Lyra didn't argue. She just kept walking, the glow in her veins casting faint light on the cracked road ahead. The city would live on without her, and she would live on without it. Somewhere out there, more battles waited, and she didn't know whether she'd fight them as a human or as the monster she feared. For now, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that she had chosen the line she would not cross, and she was still on. The right side of it, for now, they told her later through overheard scraps of conversation, through the murmured gossip she caught when she lingered too close, that the stories had already begun spreading before. She left the city. In the first versions, she was simply the warrior who ended the siege, but each retelling sharpened the image, added shadows where there had been light. By the time she was 2 days gone, she was no longer Lyra. She was shadow-forged. the one born from a forgotten forge in the darkness beneath a dying city. The name clung to her like the red glow in her veins, impossible to wash away. People would argue over what she was. Some said she was a savior, a weapon sent by fate to tip the scales. Others swore she was cursed, an omen of destruction that would someday turn on those she'd once protected. No one told the whole truth, and maybe that was for the best. Lyra didn't need their approval. The night after she left Orvan III, she sat beside a dwindling campfire in the barren wastes, listening to the wind scrape over stone. The blade lay across her knees, its black surface reflecting the flames and broken shards. It was quiet now, almost sleeping, but its weight was a constant reminder of the choice she'd made. She thought about the people in the city, the relief in their eyes when the swarm had fallen silent, the way they'd hugged each other in the streets, the laughter of children who'd somehow survived. Those moments existed because she'd acted, because she'd taken the risk, paid the price. And yet she could never share in them. Her presence would have been a shadow over their celebrations, a reminder of what she had become to make it possible. It was a strange kind of exile, one she had chosen for herself. The blade hadn't demanded it, the commander hadn't ordered it. But she knew staying would mean living under the constant question in their eyes. Was she still theirs? Or had she crossed into something else entirely? She ran her thumb along the hilt, feeling the faint thrum of power beneath the surface. "You don't get to define me," she murmured. The weapon's voice, when it came, was low and without its usual edge. "I don't have to. You already did." She couldn't argue with that. The desert stretched endlessly before her, the horizon a thin smear of pale gold against the deepening night. Somewhere out there more battles waited, alien strongholds, hidden swarms, war she hadn't yet imagined. She didn't know if she'd fight them as a human or as whatever she was becoming, and that uncertainty hung over her like the desert stars. She thought of her father, of the lesson he tried to teach her before the war took him. A weapon is only as honorable as the hand that wields it. Back then, she'd thought it meant never making something for those she couldn't trust. Now she understood. It ran deeper. The weapon wasn't just in her hands, it was in her, and the honor would be measured in every choice she made from this point on. Her thoughts circled back to one truth. She couldn't escape. Strength had saved tens of thousands of lives, but it had also erased her from the world she had saved. She could not be both their protector and their neighbor. The act of saving them had made her something they would always keep at a distance. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the dark. She let her voice carry softly into the emptiness. Speaking a truth meant as much for herself as for anyone who might one day hear her story. Strength doesn't define you. Your choices do, but every choice leaves a scar, whether you can see it or not. She remembered the commander's face when she'd asked him if they needed her, or the monster she'd become. He hadn't answered then, but she knew now. It didn't matter. They would have taken either if it meant surviving. The real question was whether she could live with the answer. That question twisted into another, one that had lodged itself deep in her since the moment she'd stood before the Nexus. If saving everyone means becoming the thing they fear most, would you do it? She asked the night air. No one replied, and maybe there was no right answer. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint hum of engines, low at first, then growing. She stood, slinging the blade across her back, scanning the horizon. Against the dying light she saw them, the glint of metal, the distant formation of ships descending through the upper atmosphere. Their shapes were alien, sleek and predatory, a hunter's silhouette against a fading sky. Her pulse steadied. The city she had saved was miles behind her now, and these ships weren't headed for it, not yet. Whatever they sought, she knew she would meet them first. Whether as Lyra or as shadow forged, she couldn't say. The blade stirred, its hum matching the faint tremor in the air. Another fight, another choice. She started walking toward the approaching storm, her boots kicking up thin plumes of dust that glowed faintly red in the light spilling from her veins. Her eyes never left the sky, even as the first stars began to prick through the darkness above the incoming fleet. The desert seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the moment when shadow and steel would meet again. And Lyra, shadow forged, walked on, ready to write the next chapter in a story that would not end here.